my biggest fear is I'm not super young, and I certainly don't learn as fast as younger people. And so I don't want to get in this class, and I don't want to be a bad sim partner. So anything I can do to get myself to where I can hit the ground running is what I'm doing.
How many people go through life doing work they really don't like, but every day dreaming of, say, working in the aviation industry? They say it's too late. They think it would be too hard. They think it would go against conventional norms. If you never go after what you want, you'll never have it. This is Fly the Transition. Join us as we soar through the captivating stories of individuals embracing a thrilling journey into the aviation industry. From pilots spreading their wings to mechanics fine-tuning the engines and a myriad of industry professionals, each with a unique tale to tell. Get ready to dive into the diverse backgrounds, the pivotal moments that propelled their leap, and the sheer determination that transformed their aspirations into reality. We're not just about dreams. We're about making them take flight. Welcome to Fly the Transition. And now your host, Jim Schilling.
Happy New Year and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Fly the Transition, where we'll explore another journey of aviation career transformation. I am your host, Jim, and on this episode, we're revisiting a guest that joined me as I relaunched the podcast just over a year ago. Aviation YouTuber and aspiring first officer Bryan Turner. We'll hear some updates and learn more about his journey to the flight deck. So it was just over a year ago that I relaunched Fly the Transition, and I was really floored by the response that I got from the aviation community. There was plenty of people who wanted to come on and tell their stories and inspire others. Since that time, we've been together for 26 episodes and amassed nearly 15,000 total plays across all platforms. So I also began producing some solo content based on my own research during that time frame as well. It's a little bit more difficult for me to do that just because I haven't made a career change into aviation myself. However, in talking with plenty of people over the course of this podcast and just researching the general concepts of career change and my own experience in management positions, I'm able to offer some insight that I hope has been helpful for others. So with the accomplishments of 2024, I want to give a big thank you to everyone who came onto the podcast. They were open, they were vulnerable, and they're willing to share their story so that it might inspire others to go chase their dreams as well. I also want to thank all of those who took the time to listen to all these episodes, and I hope that those have been beneficial for you as well, and something with the podcast has resonated with you, or you've at least been entertained. So as you move into 2025, I want to do a couple of things with the podcast this year. First, I would love to increase our reach. There's so many intriguing stories for us to share that we have shared, and there's probably more than a few people that just need that extra push of inspiration from time to time to maybe chase their dreams in aviation. If you know someone who's thinking of making that move, please share the podcast with them. If you have to take their phone and subscribe for them, or just share it with them on social media, not only would it help the podcast grow, which is kind of secondary, but I think it would help us get more reach to more people to help them chase that dream that is aviation. I also want to start to hear and share more achievements and feedback of our listeners on each episode. So one of the great things about aviation is sharing our journey and successes, and I've noticed that just everyone is just so collaborative and comes together in a big way to share in those accomplishments. So I want to do that on the podcast as well. So if you are a regular listener, you have an achievement, or if you've got feedback for any of our episodes, please send me an email at flythetransition@gmail.com. Or you can reach me on any of my social medias. They're always down on the show notes of each episode. And you can share your achievements. You can share any feedback you might have from a topic or an episode. Happy to read that on a future episode and help share in those successes. Finally, I want this podcast to not just be about what I want to talk about or what I want to hear, but what the listeners want to hear as well. So what are some things that you want to hear more of in the next year? I do have some guests and solo topics for the new year, but I want to hear from you as well. So do you like the format of our interviews? Are there certain solo topics you want to hear more of, or just certain aspects of aviation careers that we can explore a little bit further? Let me know, and we can explore those ideas. So I'll conclude here with a thank you all so much for a fantastic 2024, and I can't wait to see what 2025 has in store. For those of you not familiar with Bryan, he has a YouTube channel called Just Plain Silly, where mostly it was humor and satirical aviation content, but he's gotten a little bit more serious in the last year as he tries to make that push for the airlines. He shared videos of his quest for 1,500 hours and had a little bit more of a serious side to him this year, which has made some great content as well. We talked to Bryan about this time last year where he found himself at a crossroad of continuing in a career in IT as his company was going out of business or chasing a dream of getting a job with an airlines. So since our last episode, he has amassed the required amount of hours. He had a lot of hours to begin with, and he also has an offer from a regional airline. So we're going to dive into that topic with Bryan tonight on this episode of Fly the Transition. So I want to welcome back to the Fly the Transition podcast, the one and only Bryan Turner. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you? I hope you had a good Christmas and holidays and all that good stuff.
I did, and you too.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Good. So we had you on to relaunch this podcast a year ago.
Has it been that long, really? A year?
It was a year, yeah.
You're looking about 3 months. Wow.
We kicked this thing off again like in either late December or January.
So what you're telling me is it's been a year and I'm still not a professional pilot?
But I assume there's been some progress to that end.
Oh, there's been
which is what we'll talk about this evening.
Sounds good.
All right. So I could start with the easy. So what you been up to, but we're not going to do that.
Okay.
Last time we talked, you were in the state of kind of upheaval in your life of your company was going to go out of business. You weren't sure which direction you were going to go, but you wanted to go in all in on aviation.
Yeah.
So you're talking about building hours, working towards, professional flying gigs. So anyone who's followed your YouTube channel likely knows that you've done some of the time building. So I want to start there and talk a bit about what that was like for you, some thoughts, tips, tricks that you did to be successful in that journey.
Sure. Part 2, sequel. Yes, I was right. My company did go out of business in March of 24. They're my employer. This wasn't I didn't start this company. I always feel like people are like, oh, your company failed? Like, not mine.
No, not me.
Company went out of business, and I don't know if it's fate. Something sealed the fact that I'm not going to be an IT guy anymore. For years I would interview for 3-6 weeks and have a job. No emails, no calls, no nothing. Like, IT does not love me anymore. I'm a dinosaur, and that is absolutely fine. Tried really, really hard every single day on all the websites. Barely got any interviews. So my skill set is atrophied to the point that I'm forced into my childhood dream and my adult dream. And so
reluctantly forced into your dreams.
Reluctantly forced into. It's funny. You're like, oh my god, this would be so cool if I could fly for a living. And then when I'm gonna use the word fate. I don't really have a lot of thoughts on why things. But when life thrusts you in a direction, suddenly it doesn't feel like, oh my god, do I really want to do this? Like, what if I suck? What if I can't do it? What if it's So my inner self doubts. It's like someone's like, if your dream was to, I don't know, whatever, and someone's like, okay, here's your dream. Like, oh god, I'm not sure this is really my dream. So
yeah.
I was kind of like, well, so for the last 9 months or so, I was like, well, I'm gonna go hardcore as I possibly can down the pilot route while still looking for an IT job. Be like, I've got to do both because I can't just do nothing. And so the first hour of every day getting up and just hitting the job boards and looking for a job, and then the other 90% of my day is building time and trying to figure out what it takes to be qualified to be an airline pilot. And it turns out I didn't know, and now I do.
So when you're talking about what it takes to be an airline pilot, are you talking simply what are the actual requirements for your ATP, or are we talking about something else?
Basically, I'll word it this way, and by the time this podcast airs, it will have changed. For me, it was these are the requirements to get an interview.
Okay.
I went to Oshkosh in July, and I started talking to the people there, the different airlines, and for example, I went to NetJets and said, so how does this work? And they said, well, don't apply until you have 1,500 hours because we only allow you to apply once every 6 months. So if you've got 1,450 hours and you apply, and we say, sorry, you don't have 1,500 hours, but 2 weeks later you got them, you can't apply again for 5.5 months. So I was like, okay, I really do need to start getting my 1,500 hours. I need to start figuring out what are the requirements are. I haven't been super public about this, but the airline I'm most interested in is Envoy. I know a bunch of people who fly for Envoy. Their quality of life is great. They're very happy. They love their job. They love the focus on safety. There's so many things about that particular regional. Also, if I'm lucky, it's local to me. And so I said, okay,
sure.
That's where I'm going to start. So basically in my mind, it was there's Envoy and then everybody else. So I'm going to put all my chips that direction. If I can make it work, if I can't, then I'm just going to scatter shoot resumes to all the rest of the guys. And so, right about the time I made that decision, Envoy announced they were no longer paying for ATP CTP. That is $5,000. That,
yeah.
And I mean, if they say we're not going to talk to you if you don't have it, and there was a pilot shortage allegedly, or maybe really, I don't know, for a long time, and it was like if you could fog a mirror, you got a job, and then due to external factors that slowed down, and now there's all these pilots and not enough jobs, and so I think that's when they said, well, maybe we can tighten their requirements a little bit, and so they stopped paying for that, and so I was like, well, I've chosen to go down this path. I'll do what it takes to get in front of them. I know you want to talk a little bit about time building, and we'll get into that, but let's talk since I've opened this can.
You open the can. Let's go down the rabbit hole.
Let's look at this can of rabbits. I will be honest. I paid the money for the class, and I got really excited. That's what an instrument rating costs. That's what a commercial rating costs. That's what a multi-rating costs. They cost $5,000 ballpark. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get this new thing. There's no other way for me to word this. It's ticking a box. There's two components to it. There's a ground component and there's a sim component. The sim component was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. Absolutely worth every bit of effort in the sim. But you spend a handful of days basically this ground stuff where you're kind of just watching YouTube videos about plane crashes and then talking in class about why they happened.
Okay.
And I, it was fairly disappointing. I'm a student, right? So I'm taking notes, and the guy goes, "Oh, you're not going to be tested on any of this. Don't worry about taking notes." And I was like,
"Why am I here?
What am I paying for?" And so, hindsight, if I'm Envoy, I'm not paying for it anymore either. But there's this famous crash called the Colgan crash, which is what led to this ATP CTP, these requirements. And my review at the end of the course was those pilots would have passed this class. It's one of those things you have to do it. It's a requirement, but I didn't walk away with a new skill set. Maybe I didn't ask anyone what's this about. I just signed up and took it. But I will say this: the simulators, I got to fly an A320 simulator, a 737 simulator, and an Embraer 145. And my whole life, I've always loved the 737, and I dreamed of one day being a 737 pilot for the local Love Field-based 737 carrier. That plane is awful.
Wonder who that is. It's awful?
Oh, it's so bad.
Oh, no.
Relative. The A320 is what people say. It's like driving a train. You push buttons and then you're programming it. You're like, do this, and it does it.
Okay.
There is a disconnect that I can only tell you will sense. You're like, I'm not, this is not a stick and rudder thing. Like I'm flying my plane where, it's like, I'm telling the plane what to do, and the plane's like, I got it. I know what you want. Let me do it.
Yeah, I got you.
I'll give you a real quick example. On the 320, if you turn left, say you move this, there's a side stick, you move it to the left, the plane trims to the left. So then you don't have to do it. And it's like, oh, you want to go left? We'll trim left for you. Like it's going, okay, you're basically giving a computer an input, and the computer's saying, this is what you want to do. So anyway,
okay.
It was very neat. We did 0-0 landings. We did a lot of really cool stuff on there. It was, I guess they're called Cat 3 landings, not 0-0.
I knew what you meant.
Simulators are amazing. The 737 was fun. It's just a very loud, obnoxious, complicated airplane, and it hasn't evolved as much as I would have imagined. And then there is the Embraer, which makes me happy because like I said, we're talking Envoy, which flies the Embraer 175.
Yeah.
It's the right amount of automation and human interaction, and it felt you feel like you're flying a plane. My overview of the ATP CTP is you're not going to walk away with some new skill set. I was nervous going into the sims because I was like, what if I fail? And he goes, there's no pass or fail. We're basically just letting you have exposure to sims. And so don't go into this class thinking I'm paying for a new skill. You're paying to say, yeah, I did this thing. I took this class. I took this test. I played in the sims, and just enjoy it. But I went in thinking I'm getting a new skill set. And so maybe shame on me for thinking that. I don't know if a lot of the carriers are doing that or if that was just, an Envoy thing where they're not paying for it anymore. But given that was my target and is my target, I'll jump through the hoops for them. And I'm glad I did. So that's ATP CTP. You want to talk a little bit about our building?
Well, on the ATP CTP component, I mean, there's still a written test for that for the FAA, right?
As
long as we're down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, let's go to that part of the rabbit hole, which is probably the most important part. You can't take the ATP written test unless you've taken the class. So,
but the class doesn't prep you for the test.
It does not.
Okay.
So let's take, for example, Shepherd Air. They do all the classes. In fact, if you go take an ATP CTP class, at the end of it, they're going to give you a credit for Shepherd Air. I don't. Maybe Shepherd's the only one that offers it. I don't know. But I called Shepherd initially and said, hey, I want to sign up for this course. And they said, well, who are you with? And I said, I'm just me. And they go, that's not how this works. So
Really?
You have to complete the class.
Okay.
And I will say this, pay the $5,000 before you can take the prep course for the ATP written exam.
Wow.
And again, there's probably some naivety on my part because I didn't ask how this works. I was just like, I just assumed it was like every other written and every other process. And so a little bit of disappointment at every turn. And now I understand it and I get it. So I took the class. They gave me my little sign off. They gave me a code. I called Shepherd and I prepped probably harder than I've prepped for any other written exam in my life. It's double the length, double the questions. And it's a mix of things. Oh yeah. It's interesting. It's a mix of things you did like private type flying and then stuff you've never done before. So it's like, which side of the plane is the red light on? Which side of the plane is the green nav light on? That basic kind of stuff. And then it's asking you about mock tuck and, this, wing designs and certain things that happen at higher altitude, like all this kind of stuff that you've never done before. And so hardest I've ever studied for a written test and the best grade I've ever gotten. So I walked away feeling really good.
Well, that's good at least.
Yeah, I got a 94 on it. And so,
for you.
I got right out of the test and I texted a photo of my test to my mom. She's like my biggest cheerleader on this journey. And so
does she have a copy of it up on her refrigerator? You're not supposed to lose that. So.
You know what? I may go put it on her refrigerator, but every time I text her like some milestone, she's like, you're making me cry. And I'm like, that's the goal. Make mom proud.
So let's talk a bit now about that time building that we started talking about and found a rabbit hole.
Sure.
So what did that look like for you? I mean, did you need to build both multi-time and just cross-country hours, or was there like a certain aspect that you needed more attention to?
So I will tell you probably the best thing I discovered. If you're not using a digital logbook, I recommend everybody, and this is the most painstaking thing I've ever done, go to it's myflightbook.com, convert your paper logbook to digital. And I had 10 years of flying. It took me forever, page by page, line by line, converting this. But once you have a digital log, and they may all do this, but my flight book does it. There's a section called training, and it says, what rating are you working on? And I put ATP, and it said, okay, it goes through your logbook, and it says, you need 4 more hours of night. You need an hour and a half of cross country. You need 16 more hours of instrument. And so it tells you what you need. And then we're going to talk about interviews a little bit later. There's literally a sheet that it printed out for me that showed all the milestones and where. So I was at 450% of my cross country hours, and it puts this graph on there. And I put that that piece of paper was the most helpful thing for the last 2 check rides and the last interview I did. So, putting it in my flight book and having it tell me what I needed to do was fantastic. Because if you read the FAR and you're going to make mistakes, because there's some things where I went to go make a flight, and I called my buddy who's a FAA guy, and I said, hey, I'm making this flight. I got some questions about it. And he goes, it was a nighttime cross country. And I said, and he goes, well, who's your instructor? And I said, well, I'm not with an instructor. He goes, that's not a solo. He goes, that's
oh yeah, sure.
a nighttime cross country. And I'm like, I already booked the hotel. I already bought the fuel. And he goes, cancel it. And so
abort.
I did. And so I was like, but I was, reading the FAR AIM, the indenting was weird. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize this was under that heading. And so I ended up going out with my friend Dan Milliken, who's got the Taking Off channel. Yeah. He's a CFI, and he and I ended up flying out to Austin one night and flying back and getting the hours. But it's like, that my flight book thing will tell you exactly what it is you need, whether it's private instrument, commercial, multi. And so for me, I needed a lot. I needed about a little over 300 hours of cross country. So I knew what I needed to do. And along comes a couple of people who are now my mentors. And one of them is a pilot who does a lot of pilots and pause missions. And he goes, I happen to be an MEI, a multi-engine instructor, and I own a Baron. And we do all these trips. He's like, I'll let you know when we're going, and anyone you want to come on, let me know, and we'll do some multi-engine flying in my Baron. I said, that's fantastic. I really appreciate it. And I thought, okay, this would be a great way to get some multi-hours. I already had the 25. This particular individual is really, really aware that I have this goal. And he said, okay, he goes, we're not just going to get $100 hamburger. We're not just flying this dog. He goes, I'm a captain at this airline, and we're going to fly as a crew. I'd never heard the term pilot flying, pilot monitoring, because this is your role. These are the call-outs. These are your responses. He goes, when I say check power, you're going to look for these indications, and you're going to say power set. When I say 80 knots, you're going to say check. When I say, V1 rotate, all that kind of stuff, positive rate, gear up. So it was the least casual flying I've ever done. Still is. Derek and I fly to this day. But when we fly his plane like it's a commercial airliner. We don't fly it. And it's funny now when I get in my airplane, sometimes I'll bring the checklist for the airline for the Embraer 175, and I'll just go, I know the buttons aren't the same, but I'll walk through the paces in my plane because I'm in a cockpit. For people who don't have that luxury, I get it. Find someone who works where you're going and ask them, because I got a resounding from 2 or 3 different airlines, just get 25 multi-hours, you'll get the rest in the sim. Don't take my word for this, but I don't think you have to have the 50 hours to get an interview at an airline. They're going to teach you to fly a jet, which you've never done before, and it's going to take a lot of hours in the simulator, and you're going to cross that 50 hours. If you're like, hey, I'm interested in NetJets, I'm interested in American, I'm interested in whatever, find someone who works there. I don't know how, but find someone, go to a Facebook group or something, find someone who works there and go, hey, do I really need the 50, or am I going to get some of these in the sim? And I've got a friend who flies for Spirit. I got a friend who flies for Southwest. All of them said, you're going to get a lot of that in the sim, but get at least 25. So that's my advice, but confirm it. But that's my advice on the multi.
That's a great point that you brought up. Like, find someone at the airlines you want to go to and talk to them. But I think that being able to find a mentor like you have is really beneficial too.
It is. And I'm not dumb. I realize, he's someone who found me through my YouTube channel, and we kind of bonded over aviation and stuff. And so I have a little bit of a built-in network because of that. And I know everyone's not going to have that, but there's Facebook groups for, all of this type of stuff. There's Facebook groups for. I'm not a big Facebook guy, but, before he and I, crossed paths, I was on Facebook. There's hour building groups. There's, safety pilot groups. There's all these groups. And so that's the multi. So the cross country, I'm also fortunate that I own my airplane and I don't have a job, which means I got all the time in the world. And so because I create content, I was like, well, I need to make these flights, but I need to somehow parlay it into content. And so my thought was, for me, and then I know this doesn't help anybody else, but for me, it was like, I'm going to make these insanely long flights for the simplest reasons of all. So you and I have a mutual friend, Ryan Dombrowski, from Super Aero. And I was like, I'm going to fly to Wisconsin and have cheese with Ryan today because he's in Wisconsin and they have cheese. I got a buddy named Spencer Suderman who lives in St. Augustine, Florida. And so in one day, I did a 13-hour round trip to meet him for lunch.
Good grief.
Oh, no, it was terrible. That was the first one I did. I said, we're doing a hotel every time after. That was too much flying.
You got a hotel when you went to get cheese, right?
Yeah, I did. Well, yeah, I got stranded. But yes, I did.
I saw that.
That was the plan. But so my family got in. My daughter's like, go to Idaho and eat a potato. And so we came up with all these ridiculous, long flights. It was fairly easy for me because I have my own plane and I have the gift of time because I'm not working. And so for me, it was like, okay, if I can do 10 or 15 of these long cross countries, I can get these 300 hours in. And so that's basically what I did. And then we did a couple of family trips. I took my family we went to South Dakota and Wyoming and New Mexico and Colorado. And, so again, having a plane obviously makes it easier. It's a little more expensive. My advice is if you don't have a plane, there's a group on Facebook. Like, for instance, I'm in Texas. There's one called North Texas Time Builders, and you can go there and there are people that want to split time. And there was a lot of local people, probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 posts a week, people going, hey, I've got access to this. Who wants to split costs? I didn't fly with anyone in that group, but I did find a safety pilot group, and I ended up safety piloting for a bunch of instrument students. And that was kind of fun. Okay. So if money's an issue, I would say splitting time with someone, and some people have their own planes. Some people are renting planes. A lot of people will post in these time building groups, hey, I've got a flight school. We've got 3 Cessna 150s. We'll rent out a block of 10, 20, 30 hours, and then, multiple people will split it. So
okay.
I would say social media is probably the best bet for finding people to split time if that's a need. If you've got a plane, just go fuel it up and go. Fuel's expensive and all that, but if again, I got to have cheese in Wisconsin. The memories are worth it, you know.
But that brings up another point. You talk about the fuel, and fuel's expensive. Is there anything different you did with your flight planning for those to maybe capitalize on fuel prices?
I would be very honest with you. In the last year, I flew 300 hours and spent $42,000 on aviation.
Good grief.
A lot of that was maintenance and oil changes and annuals and different kind of stuff, but about almost 30,000 of that was fuel.
Wow.
But I burned 15 gallons an hour. I budget 15 gallons an hour. I burn a little bit less, but so what I did, there's a website. I forget the name of it. If you type in, literally go to Google and type in cheap avgas, one of the first two websites that will pop up is called like aviation fuel deals. And I would go to that website before any flight and I would click Control F and I would type 3 decimal, hoping to find gas that started with $3 gas. If I didn't find that, I would type 4.0, 4.1, find the cheapest gas in the country. And so, there was an airport down here, Rusk County Airport, which is about an hour from me, that had fuel for most of the summer that was about $3.80 a gallon. And so I would go there. It's an hour, fill my tanks are 90 gallons. And so now I'm filling, gas here. The cheapest here is probably $5.50, $5.80. So I'm saving a couple of bucks, times 90. So that's what I would do is I would go find the cheapest fuel in the country and be like, unless it was, one day the cheapest fuel in the country was North Dakota. And I was like, I should make the video. Well, I'm flying to save money. So I spent 16 hours to go fill up my tanks only to drain them on the way home.
That would have been funny.
It would have been funny.
Missed opportunity.
The day I was going to start planning that video, their gas jumped up to $4.50. And I was like, well,
never mind.
But so I Google cheap ad gas and, search for the cheapest fuel. And so I would make that my first stop and then my last stop on the way back home if it was somewhere local. In Texas, we have got a couple airports that tend to be pretty cheap. But I'm also one who I get on SkyVector and I try to find an airport that's kind of near where I want to go. And I look for an airport that's close to a city. Basically, what I'm looking for is an airport that's in walking distance to a hotel. Because what I found is I'm in Dallas. Every town isn't Dallas with respect to getting a lift or an Uber.
For sure.
And it's funny, I've landed in a town before. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get an Uber. And they're like, no, you're not. I'm like, I guess I'm going to fly somewhere else. So I basically would go to SkyVector, find an airport that looked like it had a lot of yellow around it. Then I'd get on Google Maps and find the closest hotel to it. And if it was less than a mile, I can walk with a flight bag, a laptop, and a backpack, with a change of clothes to a hotel. And so places like that tend to be cheap too. If you come to Dallas and you want to get an airport near a hotel, you're probably going to pay $200 a night. But I'm staying in $40 a night hotels.
And you're probably getting what you paid for.
It itches. Yes. It's not the family. It's just me, and I can, there have been some hotels where I'm like, turn around and sleep in the plane. I'm not opposed to that. But if it's just me, I don't care. As long as I can get some kind of food and find a place to sleep. So
sure.
There's no way around aviation being expensive. If you got to build time, probably the best bet is the safety pilot thing or, splitting time. But again, even splitting time, you're safety piloting. That's really the only way to where both people can log it if someone's under the foggles. So you fly one leg where they're under the foggles and then switch places and the next person under the foggles and you can both log it. So I did a little bit of that. But again, most of my time building was just a result of being a plane owner. And again, I'm 48 and I've been an IT guy for 25 years. So I took the Dave Ramsey course. I've put myself in a position where it's painful, but I can do it. If you're young and you're trying to do this, you probably need to pair up with a buddy or two.
Is there anything that you found specifically challenging about that phase of it?
I will say I learned quite a bit about weather. So the most challenging things are you're figuring out what your endurance is. Like the trip to Florida was eye-opening because I was like, okay, I'll take off when the sun rises and I'll land when the sun sets. I was bucking a 60-knot headwind on the way home and I was like, it's we're going on 5, 6, 7 hours and the turbulence was terrible. And I was like, I'm exhausted. I don't have any plans to stop halfway and get a room or anything. And, I told him, of course I didn't realize I was going to be this exhausted. I told my wife, like, yeah, I'll be home tonight. And so I kind of committed to that. So that get there-itis thing that we all try to avoid certainly kicked in. And so I'm completely exhausted. The other thing is one of the flights, there was a storm moving through and I did the thing that we all do, go, well, I'll fly around it. And then by the time I, turn around and come back, it'll be gone. And this was the most stationary front I've ever seen in my life. This storm sat there for days. I tried to fly around it one way, I couldn't. Tried to fly around a way to another, couldn't. I actually got caught in it unexpectedly at one point and had to not ditch. I had to, put down and land for the night.
Okay.
And then I landed at one airport that had nothing. Like there was, and I was like, it's freezing cold. It's raining, every bad thing. And I was like, I'm stuck here, freezing cold in my plane. I hadn't thought about this happening. So I don't have, now I've got a blanket in the plane. I've got a jacket in the plane. I've got, but I didn't at the time because it's Texas. It's VFR all the time. It's flat, And so I was like, well, I need to go. And so I, checked around, waited for weather to clear enough to be marginal. And then I went and flew to an airport and, found a taxi and a hotel. But shame on me for not doing better planning. But I'm so used to storms around here popping up and blowing and going away. But this was a storm in Nebraska. And I guess in different parts of the country, storms don't like, we had a storm today. It was storming and raining. And I think there were tornadoes this morning. And then by like 10 o'clock, it was blue and sunny and clear and lovely. But the rest of the world doesn't do that. When you're doing these long cross countries, you can't just assume that what you're used to is going to happen. And so,
Sure.
Again, really, really think about what the weather's doing now and what it's going to be doing 10 hours from now.
I will say before we move to the next topic, you did a number of videos on your hour and time building. And I think that, they were really entertaining. You saw some really cool places. I would highly encourage people to check those out on the old Just Plain Silly YouTube channel.
Thank you. I mean, dude, I got to see Mount Rushmore. I got to see, what was that? Devil's Tower. From like, it was like, I told my wife was like, I'll tell you what, there was a little bit of jealousy where she's like, okay, we're at home and you're doing all this kind of stuff. And I go, where do you want to go?
Yeah.
And so
let's go.
So like, let's go see Mount Rushmore. And so we flew over Mount Rushmore and then we landed and we went and looked at it. So it's, not just for me, but a little bit of an opportunity to have, create memories with the family, which was in Colorado. Oh my God. We landed in Leadville, the highest airport in North America, which was a trip, but also some of the most beautiful flying I've ever done. So, I mean, there's the flying and the hours and all that kind of stuff, but there's also the memories. Yes. I will never go back to Leadville. There's no reason to, but it was like,
right.
I've got the certificate hanging on my wall right now. I'm pretty proud of it. That took a lot of planning. And just, I live in Texas. I don't see mountains or snow. And it was like, I'm in a valley, for 30 or 45 minutes. And there's mountains that are, we're at 13,000 feet, but these mountains are above me, snow-capped. And my wife and I are like, oh my God, this is the most beautiful thing in the world. And so we landed in Colorado and we went to Estes Park and we hiked. It was like, flying for flying to build hours is great, but turning it into memories and trips, it's priceless.
Yeah, that looked like a really cool trip. I was pretty jealous when I watched that one because I don't think my plane will ever get up there. Okay, so let's talk about the next phase of things. You've got all the hours and stuff, and you start working towards interviews and things like that.
Yep.
So what did that process look like for you for that part?
This is my opinion only. I know there are services out there that you can pay money for, coaches, and you can spend a lot of money on airline interview prep. I did not. There is a website called airlineinterviews.com, I think. I paid for a subscription to that. I don't know how much it was, but it wasn't, it was cheaper than all this Avgas I've been spending money on. And what's kind of interesting about it is it's a lot of people on the website and they're all kind of in the same boat as you. And so people are telling you basically this is no secret. The airlines aren't stupid. They know this exists. People are saying, I went to an interview. Here's the kind of stuff that they asked me about. Here's the things I needed to know. And so I'm the kind of person who all my success comes from fear, my fear of failure. And so I was like, I can't screw this up. And so I started printing out, I took all the questions that everybody was asked. There'd be a question. My interview asked me this question and here's the answer. And I was like, well, maybe that's the answer. Maybe it's not. So I scraped this entire website and then I put it all in ChatGPT and I said, get rid of the answers and just give me the questions. So I just wanted a list of every possible question they might ask. And then I was like, okay. And then I grouped the questions by category. Some of them are about IFR flying. Some are about approaches, departures, arrivals, whatever. And so I grouped them. And then I was like, okay, we're going to create chapters. And so today's chapter is all the questions they might ask about arrivals. And so I went through a question, and if I knew it, I would delete it. And so I would quickly get everything I already knew out. And now I'm down to a list of chapterized questions I created that I don't know. And so I go study each question and be like, okay, how does a SID work? SIDs and STARs don't come up much for GA pilots.
No.
And then and that's an interesting example actually, because I started going through and looking and learning how they work, but I didn't quite grasp it. And so I called a friend of mine who's an airline pilot. I said, hey, can we go fly Sid and the Star? And he said, absolutely. So me and my friend Russ went out and we put a departure in, we put an arrival in, and we went out and actually flew them. So I'm a very tactile learner. Some people can hear and learn. Some people have to see and learn.
Right.
But for me, I'm like, I kind of need to go through it. And so I was like, okay, I literally had the questions, I was like, okay, there's people asking questions about how you would fly this route, this altitude, these fixes or whatever. And he's like, well, let's put them in, let's do it. And so we went and we flew them. And so I will say, I felt like I was over prepared after the interview was over. There's so many questions and so much information on that website. They're not going to, these interviews, they are fast. I mean,
Really?
my head was spinning by the time it was over. Nothing they asked me about, I was not prepared for. Like, I was prepared for anything they asked, but I was prepared for way more. And so I will be very transparent about this. I got my interview at a time when the airlines weren't hiring. My friend who's mentoring me, I said, hey, do you think I should send my resume in? And he goes, well, give me a copy of it. I'll go throw it on the chief pilot's desk. And if he wants to talk to you, they'll talk to you. And I was like, okay, that's cool. The next day I got an email saying, hey, we want to talk to you. And so I'm very grateful that I had that piece on my network. They said, when do you want to interview? And I go, how about next week? And they said, it's going to be about 3 months. So I was like,
that's a cool idea, but give us a couple months.
I was like, okay. So I studied. I spent the next 3 months just studying every single thing I could study about. A lot of it's Jeppesen charts. Like, if you want to go to the airlines, go, and it's expensive and it sucks and it's painful and I hate it. Go buy the Jeppesen charts for ForeFlight and start using them. 80% of my interview was over Jeppesen charts.
No kidding.
That seemed so important to them. And they're actually, the Jeppesen charts, in my opinion, are way better. They cost money.
Okay.
There's everything's in one stop shop. Like, everything's right there. All the information you would need. You don't have to flip back and forth between different stuff. The Jep charts are way better, and the airlines know it. So learn the Jep charts. So I go in for my interview. It's me and a couple of other kids. I say kids, they're these young cadets. They have a great cadet program.
Okay.
And then I'm the old guy off the street. So he goes, when I walked in, he goes, oh, I thought you were going to be doing the interviews. And I was like, yeah, I'm the professor. I'm the old guy. And then this doesn't matter. But one guy goes, you look really familiar. And I was like, no, please, God, no. He's like, do you make YouTube videos? I was like, this is not the time or place. Like, can I just be Bryan?
Yeah.
But so they took all of our documents. My logbook, my paper logbook's a mess, but my digital logbook is immaculate. I took that sheet of paper from my flight book with all the goals, and I tabbed every single goal in my logbook and put a little laminated sheet there. So it's super, super easy to find out where every milestone was. This was the flight where I hit hour 1500, whatever.
Okay.
So they took all of our documents, and then they sent us up to a room, and we were in a conference room together, just kind of hanging out, all nerves, just bundles of nerves. And then, so of course we start talking, like, what's your experience? What's your background? And, I feel a little okay, because these are all 400-hour cadets that are like, well, I'm working on my CFI.
Yeah.
They're low hours. I'm kind of like, okay, well, I'm qualified. And then they bring us into a room one at a time. And so they bring me into a room, and there's a guy named Hunter. Oh, this guy, I talk fast. This guy talks at the speed of light. And Hunter sits down, and he is like rapid fire question. There's a lady in the room who's from HR. So he would ask a bunch of rapid fire questions, and then she would take over and just give me so how'd you get here? Like, tell me, what's your journey like? And then she would tell me her journey. She's like, I was a pet sitter and blah, blah, blah. Then I, got into flying, and, because I had a friend who was a pilot. So she's there to, it's kind of a good cop, bad cop thing. She's there to
sure. Yeah.
Put you at ease and ask you the fluffy questions. And so they would ask me questions like, well, what is it about this particular airline you're interested in? I shared stories about my friends. What is it about, flying? Like, it was very just kind of like, where's your passion? Like, what got you here, kind of thing. And she threw out 3 or 4 of those every time. I think every time you could tell I was getting a little overwhelmed by Hunter's rapid fire intense questions. The majority of the questions he asked were, we were doing a flight from A to Z, and he'd pull up a jet chart, or he would pull up a different part of the flight plan. And what's the symbol? What's the symbol? How high do you going to fly here? What do you need to, what altitude are we holding at? It was very rapid fire. The whole interview was probably 30 minutes.
Wow, that's quick.
And I mean, I will give everyone this piece of advice. He was talking so fast, I felt obligated to respond in kind. And so he's asking a question, I'm answering, he's asking, I'm answering. And there was one point where he asked me a question, and I was like, whoa, hold on, let's back up. I go, 2 questions ago, you asked me what speed we wanted to hold at, or, because of this altitude. I go, I'm sorry. I go, it's actually published on the chart here. I gave you the default answer based on the formula, but I said, no, it says here we're holding at this speed. And he's like, okay, very good. So, but I kind of fell into, I don't want to use the word trap. I kind of fell into, I'm going to say trap. I kind of fell into trap, feeling obligated to, crap, this guy doesn't have a lot of time. I got to match his energy. Really. And it was silly. But it tripped me up, but at least I was, astute enough to catch the fact that I tripped up, and I was like, okay, hold on. Let's back up. I need to answer these questions right, not quickly. It's not a game show. And so I said, okay, thank you. We'll talk it over and we'll, let you know. And then I it's like most like most aviation written exams. Either after the test is over, like either I aced it or I failed it. Like maybe I have no sense for how I did.
Right.
And then they pull guy number 2 out, they pull the next guy out, and then everyone goes through the same thing. And I said, I came out and I go, okay, now that we've all taken the interview, what'd they ask you? Because I wanted to know, did we all get the same questions? We got similar questions, not all the same questions. And I said, here's one I know I missed. And then a couple of the other guys said, yeah, I missed that one too. And I go, it's a good sign, I think, if we all missed the same question, right?
Yeah.
It's not just I'm stupid. We're all fuzzy on this.
We're all dumb.
Yeah. And then this lady comes into the room and she says, hey, Bryan, why don't you come down with me? And I was like, okay. I prepared myself to not emote. If they're like, sorry, thanks, but no thanks, try again. But I walked, they took me to this conference room, and I saw very clearly a drug test on the table, and I was like, holy crap. That's got to be, they're not going to be like, you didn't get the job, but we also think you're high.
We listen to your responses and we have concerns.
Yes. So they did. And I literally have my offer letter sitting right here. So I, conditioned, they did, I think they've already done the background check and all that kind of stuff. So basically, and I asked the guy, I said, do you have 2 questions? I said, do you have any idea when my class date is and what are the odds I'll be based in Dallas? And he goes, for class date, he's like, let's just assume 8 months because I don't even want to. It's like, okay. He goes, things are moving slow right now. And he said, as far as where you'll be based, he goes, I could tell you an answer today and it could change tomorrow. He goes, that you won't even know until the end of your class. But so as I sit here today, it's, we're in between Christmas and New Year's. Based on conversations I've had with a couple of folks internally, we're, without a lot of education, estimating mid-March. I should probably get a phone call. And so in the meantime, I'm, so I do have I guess they call it a CJO. It's a job offer, but I have to go complete the ATP and pass their training.
Gotcha.
So they'll say, hey, you got a class date in 2 weeks. At that point, I'll start getting paid and I'll start getting trained. And then I don't know if the class is 6 weeks, 12 weeks. I have no idea how long the class is, but it's a pretty intensive. They put everybody in hotels for this stuff. So it's kind of like you eat, sleep, and breathe it.
Yeah.
And then if all goes well, you have a check ride and a couple of other different maneuver validations. There's a couple different tests. And then once that's done, you spend the first 50 hours flying with a check airman. So basically somebody who can do both jobs in case you suck.
In case you say, I got it. Just shut up and color.
And then after that, you're free and clear. So the hope is the next time I'm on your podcast, I hope I'm a first officer.
Let's just make this an annual thing.
Let's do it.
The annual, where's Bryan at episode?
Yeah, dude, I hope the next one I'm in a hotel somewhere like, man, I'm in freaking Boise having a potato.
I'm in some awful place in the Midwest, and I don't want to talk about it, but
it's fun.
You want to know.
But I'll say this, as much as I want everything to happen and I want it to happen now, the fact that the world is moving slow right now is kind of a gift. So I literally built a syllabus on my own of the things I need to know. I need to know how to program an FMS. I'm going to need to know how to do these things called flows and callouts. I'm going to need to know how to do all these things. And so I said, well, I'm going to pretend that my class date is February 15th, and I'm going to back into all the things I think I need to know. And I'm working with folks from Envoy. Every airline's going to be different. You can't just go out and say, I'm going to go watch YouTube videos on how to fly the 175 because the one airline might do it different from another.
Oh, sure.
You may mislearn it or learn it the wrong way, and then now you've got to unlearn it. So I'm making sure I'm doing anything that's generic, how the plane works, systems, and then I'm working with a couple of mentors at Envoy going, how do you guys do this? What are your requirements for this? All that kind of thing. So now I've got this little syllabus to just hold myself accountable because I've got, again, I'm not working, I've got time. So I'm like, well, with my time, I want to make sure that because, my biggest fear is I'm not super young and I may not, certainly don't learn as fast as younger people. And so
right.
I don't want to get in this class and I don't want to be a bad sim partner. I don't want to be slowing someone else down because I'm stumbling. So anything I can do to get myself to where I can hit the ground running is what I'm doing. So, I've got a little routine every morning where I go through and I've got I bought an FMS, the flight management system, the computer on these airliners. I've got an emulator for my iPad and I got the one. Yeah, I got the one for the 175. Every morning I get up and I program a flight. And then I go through a couple of checklists and I go through a couple of call outs and I go through a couple of flows. And so I'm trying to get these things to where they're muscle memory. What I've been reading is what happens to people is you learn these flows. And if you're a GA pilot, you may not know what a flow is. The checklist for the E175 is smaller than the checklist for my Comanche.
Yeah, you told me that earlier. I'm like, no way.
Dude, it's one side of one piece of paper.
Wow.
And but everything else is memory and flows. And there's these things that a certain event happens and triggers this particular flow. So the first officer does this, the captain does that, and it's a dance that needs to happen and needs to happen on time. And so what I've been reading is people will learn these flows, but then when they get in the sim, there's too much going on. So they want you to literally balance a broom on your hand while going through the call outs. Be doing something, a Rubik's Cube, a fidget spinner, juggling. Yeah. Do something that requires you to be, I don't know how to juggle, but I may have to if I want to be a pilot. But be solving a problem tactilely while going through these call outs and these flows so that when you start doing V1 cuts or emergencies or engine outs or something, you're not going, oh crap, I don't have time to talk. I got to fly this plane. You can't do that. And so a lot of people kind of clam up when they're in the sim and they get put in a situation where, we're simulating an engine failure and suddenly you're screwing up all your call-outs and flows, which really need to happen in a certain time, in a certain order. So I'm memorizing it. I'm going through the flows and everything now. And then here in a couple of weeks, I'm going to start incorporating, I don't know, whatever I determine to be my version of juggling. Maybe it's crocheting or, I don't know, dealing a deck of cards, but something where I have a task and I'm doing the flows where I can disconnect flying the plane, AKA whatever tactile thing I'm doing from what my brain needs to say. So the captain knows that I'm monitoring the flight, or if I'm pilot flying, that type of thing. So,
yeah.
But point is, I've got the gift of time right now. So whatever I can do to get myself to where I'm not just a deer in the headlights on day 1 or day 10 or any port in the training. So I'm trying to make sure, according to the people that are working at this company already, that I'm learning the things the way they teach them, so that when it comes my turn, it's not like, oh, here's the old guy who's going to slow us all down.
Right. Well, it's good that you got a plan at least. I mean, you've got the time, you're taking advantage of it. So that's awesome. I'm happy for you, man.
I'm happy for me too. I'm ready for what my wife keeps telling me. She's ready for to have flight benefits.
Oh, I thought you were going to say she's ready for you to get out of the house.
Probably that too.
Please go to work. I don't care where. Just go.
I will tell you, she said it. She goes, this couldn't have happened any other time in our life because our kids now are 15 and 17, almost 16, 17. So my son, I don't know, was it 10 o'clock? He's at work. But when they were little, we couldn't have done this.
Right.
And, if they're much older, I'm too old. So this window kind of came up right about the right time. So I don't know. Everyone's going to have a balance. I have to figure out how to do it, but I don't know. But I have
faith in you.
I'm 48 years old. I'm hopefully going to prove that you can do this. I'm not super old, but if I get in, I got a 15, 20 year career at an airline. That's how awesome is that?
I'd say it's pretty awesome.
So it can,
for sure.
Hopefully it can be done. And I don't know. And if you're young, just do it. I wish I would have done this 20 years ago, man. If I have any regrets, it's that I didn't jump at this years ago.
Is there anything else that you want to add with that process or any of your prep that you think might be important for someone listening to know?
So with aviation, my biggest concern is always the money. I feel like that's the biggest hurdle to aviation. And I don't, aside from stressing that I'm a 48-year-old dude who's at the end of a career, if you're 22 years old, I mean, you're going to have help from mom and dad for this. Like, this is expensive.
Yeah.
That's my biggest thing is like, I don't know how to help someone who's, I get on TikTok and I see all these student pilots that are like trying to figure, and I'm like, God, if I was 22, like, it was easy to go into IT. But like, this is so expensive. And that's the thing that pops in my head all the time. Like people are going to be, well, it's easy because you can afford it. I'm like, and I couldn't have 20 years ago. So like, that's where I'm like, I don't have any advice for that person other than try to split the cost or share it. But I think finances and aviation are the biggest hurdle. And I don't have an answer for people that isn't, well, wait until you've worked your way up to the top of a career and you're old, miserable rich guy.
When you're miserable with your current job and can't do it anymore, that's your time.
Hustle and bust your ass and find a way. And again, I'm fortunate. Again, I have this little network, which most people don't have. So I hate giving advice to people when I have advantages, right? Now I need to go back and listen to the original one and see what I was complaining about then.
You're going to lose your job and you had to tell these people you're going to fire them. And I think that was... Well, Bryan, congratulations to you on this great opportunity. I'm really excited for you and I can't wait to see where you go with this journey with your new gig.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I always enjoy it.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure having you on. You're a good time. All right. Well, thanks again, Bryan, and good luck.
All right. Thank you, Jim.
So a huge thank you to Bryan Turner for joining me for another episode of Fly the Transition. I'm really happy to have him come back on after a year and just hear about his progress and what he's done to make that happen. On a personal level, I've also become friends with Bryan over the years. He's been incredibly supportive of my creative outlets. He's offered all kinds of help and tips and pointers, and I can't thank him enough for everything that he's done, not just for myself in this podcast, but the Fly Midwest podcast as well. He's just an all-around stand-up great guy. So thank you so much for that, Bryan. And we're all super excited to see what this next phase of your journey in aviation looks like. All right, as we get ready to wrap up, you know the drill. If you like what I'm doing, please leave me a rating and a review anywhere you're listening to this podcast. I will read any reviews you leave on a future episode. And the ratings also help to talk to the algorithms of the podcast platforms to get Fly the Transition into more ears. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, if you know someone who could benefit from these episodes, please share the podcast with others so that we can continue to inspire those looking to make a career change into aviation. And finally, if you have a topic for a show in the future or you'd like to be a guest, reach out to me at any of my social medias or at flythetransition@gmail.com. We'd love to have you on and tell your story. Thanks once again for joining me on this episode of Fly the Transition. And until next time, keep your eyes on the skies and your dreams soaring high.
You've been listening to Fly the Transition. Life is too short for you not to do what you love. And our passion is to give you all the tools you need to make the transition from doing what you do to being in the aviation industry. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, you can reach out by email at flythetransition@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook at Fly the Transition. And the website for Flying Midwest Media is flyingmidwest.com. Keep soaring. See you next time on Fly the Transition.